All right,
Awesome.
let's
And
go.
maybe like
Uh,
if you get want to just
mhm.
start maybe on a high level, and then just because I didn't really discuss much yesterday on a grand or on a maybe if you want to just kind of introduce the whole concept and everything
Yeah,
else,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
yeah, awesome, cool,
I'll
thank you.
start from the very beginning.
Hmm.
All right. So, well, thanks everyone for joining and yeah, taking the time to learn about this tool. We're pretty excited about it. This has been a product that was in development for quite some time. We, you know, started from the very basics and got it to this point through years of development. Yeah, I mean it's pretty awesome tool. There's nothing like it out there. There are certain
Hmm.
equivalent apps out that exist, but they are not to the extent the functionality is not there to the extent that we have it.
So do you want to just
Go
maybe
ahead.
quickly like just spend like a little bit of I guess intro about your career and your experience and your work at
Oh yeah, sure.
Salesforce and how you came up with
Yeah,
this
yeah.
whole idea. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, first of all, my name is Nikita. I've been partnering with Luke for quite some time now. We were colleagues way back. Worked on a couple projects. So I'm actually also an engineer. I've been started. I started as a traditional engineer. I didn't start with Salesforce, so I've been working at Salesforce for about 9 years. I've actually built some of the platform that we're using. It's been a long time ago, but it was a really fun ride. And one of the things that Salesforce did really well, and something I remember from my days as a developer, is how they manage releases. As you know, they do a few of those a year. Between the major releases, there's a bunch of minor releases that we tend not to notice because they're usually bug fixes, but internally they still go on. The way they did that without breaking everybody, which as you know can happen. You touch code, you tinker with the functionality, and it tends to break. And that's precisely what they wanted to avoid. So internally, they had a tool that does something like Pharos. It was far more basic, but it was something that was used religiously during every release. So I don't know, you guys probably know this. When you push code, right, and typically someone goes in, tries to verify things, and yeah, so on and so forth. And that they did all that, but on top of that, they had a way to monitor every instance for issues or exceptions more accurately. So as you know, Salesforce is built on Java, so you get these Java stack traces all over the place, right? If something's failing, and so they had the tool that captured all of that, kind of let you look at all of the exceptions dropping live on an instance. And during the release, us as developers would sit there in front of the screen and just keep refreshing, all these exceptions, look through them, make sure it's not release related. If it was release related, we'd have to log a bug, and then triage it, meaning we have to figure out whether we fix it now or fix it later, that kind of thing. So, that was, like I said, like a religious practice. Right? They did that for every major release, so that right away, if they see an issue, they can either fix it or they'll know about it and fix it later, or something else, right? Or maybe they decide it's not related to the release and they just move on and fix it much later. So that was kind of the process, and a lot of people do that. Not just Salesforce. This isn't something that they invented. Certainly, other companies that are software shops, they will do this similar procedure, and they may have different tools for those purposes. I mean, it really depends on your stack, but it's always good to fix something before it breaks other functionality, impacts users. In case of Salesforce, they didn't want to affect their customers because obviously that leads to poor reputation. They were a public company at the time, didn't want a stock price to get affected, so understandable that they'd be worried about this. But even as as a Salesforce developer, which I later on became, doing consulting, so similar to what Luke is engaged in currently. I've worked on multiple projects, many different orgs. this kind of approach where people pay that much attention to issues in their org is just unheard of. Like everybody, at best, they would try to, maybe do a little bit of testing, but there was no monitoring for errors, no, no troubleshooting process, no error handling process, nothing like that. And of course, that leads to poor quality. It leads to user impact. Loss of business, loss of reputation. It's all kinds of bad. It leads to loss of adoption among users, right? If they know the system isn't doing something right, they're just not going to use it, or they'll be so reluctant to use it. So it's these are the things that a lot of companies struggle with, and it's pretty easy to avoid. For one, it's if you just had a tool that would let you gather all of the issues in one place, let you look at them with some context, and even better, monitor or alert you to when they're happening. So it sounds really simple, but it's actually quite complex what's involved here, because Salesforce. Well, I guess I should pause it here. Any questions so far? Does that all make sense? Any
I think it does. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, please feel free to stop me, guys, if anything is unclear. Especially as I start going through some of these technical things here. Definitely, don't be shy. So as I mentioned, right? So no tool exists on Salesforce that does this. I'm sure some of you have used the log util in the past, right? Probably familiar, right? There's an Apex class that you can pass some data to, and it'll create a custom object in the system, typically called an error log or something, and then you put some information in there so that you can come back and troubleshoot problems. Well, that's great. It's a good practice, and there are a bunch of these out there. There's the open source utils. There's a lot of companies would just build something homegrown because it's so easy, and they can do it the way they want it. So again, really good practice, but doesn't solve all the problems. It works when you're disciplined about it, and it only works for Apex and maybe a few other areas, but you really have to put in a lot of effort to build it, to maintain it, to make sure any code that's added is enhanced to add that error handling functionality. A lot of people don't bother, so it just kind of it tends to be halfway implemented. With Pharos, this app that we built, things are a little different. First of all, it's a native application, right? There's no, we don't have a service that looks at your org and pings it or logs in there or anything like that. It's still inside the org. You install a managed package, and you right off the gate, you get a view like this, right? So configure it. We'll get to the configuration part later. The good news is it's actually super easy to do. And then you just wait, and then all of a sudden, this is something that we found from our customers is they're surprised by what the stuff finds. It's because they don't know, and a lot of people really have no idea what is going on in their org. I mean, they may have a clue that something might be breaking, or I've heard users complain about this or that, but they don't have anything to point the finger at and say, okay, this is the problem right here, and it's been a problem for some time. And this is what caused it. Let's fix it. So this is kind of what the problem that we're trying to solve with this product is: not only give you kind of the repository and the the central place for all your logs, but also provide context, ease the troubleshooting pains. As we know, there are many, right? You have to chase people around, try to ask for information, be the detective. It's painful, it takes a while. So we try to alleviate some of that. And on top of that, we try to provide you some nice visuals, like this dashboard as an example, so that it's easy to see where the problem areas are, what's happening, how long it's been happening, so that sort of thing. And on top of that, provide you a way to stay on top of the problems, right? Not only are things happening in your org, but we'll actively notify you when something's breaking. And we can do that over many different channels. We have a few integrations. So we provide that, what we call observability, right? That's sort of your academic term for what we do. It's a way to measure the state of your org and especially when it relates to issues. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the app is about. The other kind of deeper, I guess, value in this is not only do you get all of what I described, the central log repository, et cetera, but also you sort of get this troubleshooting process out of the box. You don't have to figure out, okay, an error comes in, all right, let me go and create a Jira ticket, okay, and then you copy paste, you go to your Jira board, you throw it in the backlog, so on and so forth. And then somebody maybe fixes it, and then it breaks again, and so you have no idea. So we solve that part of it too, to some extent. The process for figuring out what the issues are, finding them first of all, figuring out what they are, and then making sure they're addressed and fixed as per the normal software development life cycle. So it fits into that kind of DevOps loop. If you guys have ever seen that, the build, test, deploy, like they like to put that infinity graph, and so we fit into that under monitoring, among other things. So yeah, that is essentially what the app is about, and I'm just gonna get straight into it, kind of show you the basics here, and we'll get into some more advanced stuff, and then hopefully it'll be a lot easier for you to then go and implement this on your own, which I like I said, is very easy. Any questions so far? Any before I move on? No questions. All right, cool. So I've had the screen open.
I think
go ahead.
we have one. Ravi.
Oh yeah.
So we have that Apex exception email, right? And also we can set the flow errors email and all.
Yep.
So these have so basically these app log those type of errors, right? Or any other thing also that is not visible to regular user, that is also logged by this app.
Yes, that's correct. So I'll show you what we do log, and yes, those Apex exception emails that you get, or the flow error emails, that's all part of it. We definitely keep track of those as well, and we turn them into what we call the log record. So actually, great segue. So let me start off and launch straight into it. At the core of the app, it's the log record, right? It's an instance of a problem, an error, like, that may come from an email, or that may come from, failing flow, or, a batch job is broken, or, bulk API error occurs, or, email to case problem, or something like that, right? So it doesn't matter what it is, where it came from, it's a problem. And so it turns into this log record. And what that looks like is, so you get a view like this. By the way, you guys can see my screen okay, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. All right, so let's take a look at one, for example, here. Let's look at this one here. This is a flow error that happened, and it seems to be a hierarchy constraint violation, a circular dependency. Oh, that's fun. That's really that's a fun one. Basically, here, you've seen this before, right? A failed flow. Among other things, you'll notice, there's some extra data that we have. So what you're looking at is essentially a custom object which we populate with lots of data, not only about the error, but also about the environment at the time that the error occurred. So for example, here, you got some basic info, like what type is it, what's the category type, what's the functional area in this case, right? And more of a high level business definition of where the problem is. You got some flow information because it's a flow error, organization name, we'll get to that later. Then, you've got things here, when did it first happen? When did it last happen? That kind of stuff. What's the object it's related to? Who's the user? Over here, we've got things like, how many users are logged in, right? Total active sessions, how many jobs are running, what those jobs are. It looks like these guys have this roll-up helper application that's really common. And as you can see, it pretty much kills the whole flex queue because they've abused it. But maybe that's not related to this issue here. What packages are installed? among other things, right? And then the occurrence, which is a really important part of troubleshooting when you're trying to figure something out. It's always good to know, okay, is this something that just happened? Is it something that's been happening? Is it related to last week's release? Oh, wait, no, it's been happening a month ago. So, okay, not related. Immediately, you can answer a lot of questions by looking at when did this thing happen and how many times. And that's the view that we give you here. And there's a couple different ways you can look at it. There's also a timing view, which gives you a window of time. In this case, it's 10 minutes around the occurrence of that error. So you can look at maybe other errors that might be related, or maybe there's some causation going on. You've probably seen it where you kick off a flow, it then spawns a future method in Apex or something like that, or maybe it triggers something, and then from the trigger there's a future method that's called, and so on and so forth. So there's a chain of things. So this view kind of gives you the ability to look at it from that perspective. As you can see, I'll talk about the Jira stuff later. We capture the audit trail, among other things, right? So up to 48 hours, you can look at the audit trail, see if any changes have been made to the org. And by the way, all of this information is saved with the log record. It's not queried dynamically when you look at the page. It's always stays in this record. So you come back to it a month from now, 2 months from now, that view won't change, including this debug view, which I'm sure you've all noticed. And this is something that Salesforce offers a similar view, but it's not quite as good. It gives you, in case of a flow, it's sort of a live stack trace. You can think of it this way. You can debug it, you kind of move through it and see what the values are, how the data is changing. You can look at what that step is supposed to be doing, things like that. So all of that is going to live with this log record forever. We also capture deployments, so sometimes it's useful to see what's been released to the org, that sort of thing. That is pretty much the building block of the app, and everything revolves around this log record. Now, this is a flow error, so let's take a look at another one. Let's find one that's let's look at this one maybe. Here, I think that's an Apex error. Yeah, this is an Apex error. So this is a code issue, unlike the other one where it was a flow. Here, it's an Apex problem, right? So when we look at Apex issues, we typically look at something like this, where it gives you a stack trace with line numbers, and it's not very useful unless you have the code in front of you. Moreover, it has to be that version of the code that's running in production. So you kind of have to do a few things to get this. And then, even then you'd have to go and, pull this up class by class, look at all the methods. We kind of just give you this really nice full context view of every line in the stack trace. So you can basically, sometimes you can even figure out the problem from just looking at this alone. Other information that I mentioned before, like user, object, so on and so forth, that's also captured. Sometimes it's there. Other times it may not be, just depending on how the error manifests. And then, of course, the occurrence graph and, the audit trail and so on and so forth. All of that's standard with every log record, right? So this is an Apex error. Let's find something that's more interesting. This one is an integration issue.
One question that
yep.
Do that flow shows the managed package log as well, like this only, or it will show something else in case of managed package?
So we will show the managed package error. We'll even tell you which managed package it's from. The one thing we won't be able to report is the actual code behind it. Like, we'll know the line number, right? And so we can show that, but there's physically no way to look into the managed package code. Only the vendor can do that. But we will capture the instance, right? We'll show that it's this managed package, it happened in this date and time, so on and so forth. All of this other information will be there, but the stack trace won't be complete.
And one more thing, if we enable the managed package log from the Salesforce side, we request the support and they enables the log for managed package as well sometimes, right? So does that work in that
you will be able to see it then, yes. If you turn on the logs, then yes, you will be able to see it. Now, I don't know that we haven't tried this with all managed packages. We've seen this for a couple, but it seems to work. I don't know that this is a documented functionality with Salesforce that's supposed to do that, but it does leak these stack traces. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's definitely there. Any other questions?
And this development status you are showing at the end, is it related to that file only, or it's just general deployment status? Sorry.
These here.
Yeah. Is it related
Yeah,
to
so
that
this is
class, or it's all the
no. This is all the deployments that have taken place right before this error occurred. Right, so it may not necessarily have been caused by this one here, but it occurred around the same time. So that's that's why we show it here.
Okay.
Yep, and the same for audit trail, right? It shows you all the audit trail that happened right before the instance of this problem.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Right. Yep. All right. So this one is an interesting one because you guys probably have been building call outs in Salesforce, right? To talk to another API or REST service or something like that. Probably use call outs. And typically this is the most common reason for people to have, to implement the log util is they want to log a request and response that they get from a service that they're trying to integrate with. And extremely common, like I mentioned, and also very, the way people do it is they put two fields on the log record, request and response, and then you just get the raw JSON or whatever. So we take it one step further. And if you guys ever used Postman before, which I think a few of you probably have, this is a very similar view to what Postman offers, in that you've got the information about the request here at the top and the response at the bottom. And you can, as you can see here, you've got your params, your headers, your body, all the HTTP stuff. There's some headers here. There's this. I don't know if there's a body here. Looks like there's no body in this request, but it's just a get. And then the response, same deal, right? You got the body, you got the cookies that came back, the response headers, and this is the response body that came through. You got your status, 429. You could save this, export it, so on and so forth. There's different ways you can view this. There's other formats that we support here. So very, very nice and convenient to be able to look at the request and response right there. You typically would have to do a system.debug or something crazy, and then enable debug logs, and copy and paste this into Postman, try to recreate this. You just do it all from right here. You can actually hit that replay button, and you can replay that request from the log record. So here we go. Here's the response that it returned. Unlike this time where it was blocked temporarily, here we got an actual response. So things seem to be working. And of course, you got the stack trace right here. Again, side by side with all the HTTP information. All of the other data stays with the log record as well. So that's another example. We've got other things here. Process builder, very similar to flows. We provide a visual troubleshooting view. You can click around, hit these buttons, look at the actual step. Here's the unable to lock row. So this, I was trying to update an account, and looks like it ran into a concurrency issue here. Okay, any other questions before I move on? All right, no questions. Great. So log records, obviously your main instance of a problem. We gather every instance of every error, right? So then what you could do is then you can start putting together reports and dashboards that will tell you very interesting information. So like, for example, this is from today, right? This is what we had today. This org, by the way, is a test org. So it's 88 errors, which is more than what you want to have in your org. Ideally, when you go to this dashboard, everything will be blank, which means you have no problems. But as it so happens, we have 88 of them today, and you can see right from this, what are the problems, right? What is the type of my issues? What's my functional area that's been affected? You can see a detailed breakdown, how many users have been affected. This is a very important metric to keep an eye on, because this usually means, if this number is high, people are going to start complaining. Some data is going to get impacted. There'll probably be issues. Breakdown by the user, monthly views, so all that sort of thing. So just, super easy dashboard to build. This comes with the package, by the way, so you don't have to build it. But you could build these kinds of views all day with the data that we gather. And by the way, all of these log records, you don't have to actively go and create them. All of that's captured as soon as the issue happens, obviously, right? So all in real time. There are a few exceptions to that when it comes to synchronous jobs. We'll talk about that later. But flow problems, Apex problems, all that falls down. We turn into log record right away. All right. Now you might say, okay, well, that's all well and good, right? But how do I know what are the actual issues, right? Like, because you might have an error, right? And you might have the error happen again and again and again and again, and it might happen 100 times over the course of several days, but it's the same problem. So that's an excellent point, because as a developer, or if you're maintaining this org, what you want to know is what are your problems that you need to focus on and you need to address. And ideally, you'll be able to prioritize them based on a few key metrics. With the log record, you could see some of that, but it doesn't really give you the full picture. So on top of the log record, we have what we call an issue. And this is, again, a custom object that exists in the package. And it basically umbrellas the log records. And by that, I mean, an issue can have multiple logs associated with it. Like, for example, if we take a look at this one here, this has got 700 instances of a problem here. There's some that are less here, like this one is, seems to be a lot more sane, but it's happening a lot. It's happening for a month, looks like, and today it affected one user and affected one data record, but in total, it happened 26 times. But it looks like it all happened for one user. So again, it's very nice to know that information, because you all of a sudden now have a sense of priority and what to do about this. Okay, if it's just one user, okay, it happened 26 times, but it's just for one user. So obviously this may not be as critical as some of the other things that you might have to deal with in your org. We also tell you, how many days on average goes between seeing 2 instances of an issue, how many times it happens per day. Looks like this happens a solid once per day, and this is probably a scheduled process. Yeah, it's automated process. So definitely doing some data updates. It looks like it's failing to do so. So so this is basically what an issue is. It tells you aggregated information from the instances of logs that are behind this. And you can think of it as sort of your kind of bug tracker light at the same time, right? You've got a life cycle here. If you want to work on that, you can assign this to someone. You can, complete the issues. You can duplicate them, link them together. So sort of what Jira does, a lot more limited than Jira, of course, is this is not what we're trying to solve with this product, but you could use this as to track your work. There's also, you can relate issues to each other. Here are all the logs associated with it, so on and so forth. So one thing I'll point out is, you'll see this debug view that we looked at for a log record. You have this available at the issue level. Now it will, because an issue is associated with multiple logs, there may be multiple stack traces involved, right? So it'd be nice to see all different kinds of stack traces that are involved in this. And this is, what that allows you to do. It looks like this was a related issue. That's why this pulled it up here. So this even pulled up a process builder error, right? So because we related these. So yeah, this is kind of at the high level. Does that make sense, first of all?
Yes, Nikita.
Great.
Yeah.
You can play around with this, once you guys get your hands on this. There's like all these different kinds of views we got. Here's the user impact, here's the data impact. These are all charts that you can interact with, so on and so forth. And, issues, the nice thing about issues is this is sort of your backlog, right? You could think of it as it's a backlog of issues in your org that you could start to try and fix, as opposed to looking at the raw log record data. Okay. All right. Let me talk about some of the other cool stuff we're doing. Yeah. Oh, any questions?
No, I said very cool. Go ahead.
Yeah,
right.
tool is really cool. I have a question, but it's not related to the functionality of the tool, but it's more of technical details of the tool. So yeah, how will Pharos get to know that whenever some error occurred in one of our custom code or our configuration?
How will it know that there's a problem?
Yeah.
Well, Salesforce actually reports this to you. And it does that through emails in some cases. In other cases, there's platform events that are being raised. In other cases, we actually have to go and actively monitor for these failures. But they can be found in the system. Now, Salesforce tends to report most of these, sometimes in like a sandbox environment. We've seen some funky error reporting from Salesforce, and I think that they're just trying to save bandwidth on some of these lower tier environments like dev sandboxes or dev orgs in particular. But production orgs pretty solid as far as error reporting goes, and if Salesforce reports it, we capture it. It's pretty much how it works, right? So if you have an exception that you're not try catching in your code, chances are that'll pop up. If you are try catching that exception and doing a system.debug, which you should not be doing if you're doing that, but if you are doing that, then we will not be able to capture that error because you're technically handling it, but it is not being surfaced to the top of the code because you've try cached it and kind of swallowed that exception.
Okay. Let's say that we are trying to save some record using some custom code, and we got some custom validation exception which we are not handling. Okay. So in that case, so do you know any specific event Salesforce reports? Because I am unable to relate how actually you are getting that error. So that's the reason I am asking this question. So whenever some custom validation occurs, so what event?
Yeah, so there are different there are differences, right? And let's say you have a validation rule, right? That's firing and preventing a record from being saved. Now, if a user is sitting out there and trying to update this on the detail page, they'll see the error, and Salesforce won't report it as an error. But if you have a flow that's like an asynchronous flow or something like that, or if you have a anything maybe other Apex calling it or something like that, and it's not visible to the user, then Salesforce will report it. It will either send an email. Usually will send an email. Sometimes if it's a batch job, then we'll get a platform event. So it just really depends on where it's coming from. If it's a flow, then you get an email. Email to case, it also sends an email. So definitely those are kind of the channels that we have. But the email alone won't tell you much. It'll just say that this broke, right? Maybe give you a stack trace. But it doesn't give you all this other data that we gather. So all of the other stuff that you saw in the log record, that's all kind of automated capture that we've built.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Any?
Yeah. So it makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
Now what you can also do is you can utilize Pharos as a log util, right? So if you're building code, and we definitely recommend doing that. If you're building some code, you actually have the ability to use our log util, which you can then put inside of your catch block and log the exception, right? So that in that case, you're explicitly catching the error and turning it into a log file. And we provide you tools to do that. So you don't have to write your own log util. There's a ton of different methods that you got here for for those kinds of purposes, right? And then the same thing for like a Lightning Web component. There's an equivalent one for that. If you want to log from UI, handling exceptions in TypeScript, that sort of thing. So, you know, obviously better to handle errors than not to handle them. But when they're not handled, chances are Salesforce will report it.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
so I have one
uh-huh.
question.
More
So let's
questions?
say
Yes.
I'm installing it in the developer org, and I want to use it as a debug log, right? So let's say I'm developing something on community page. So first I need to create that debug log for that specific user, right? If I am
No, you don't actually need to enable debug logs. That's the cool thing about it. You don't need to turn that on.
okay, so directly I can get logs of whatever is failing.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Again,
Because
it depends on
without that, I think we are enabling it, and also for the Apex error and exception, we need to create that user, right, for that user debug log. So all those will not required then.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to have that. Yeah. Again, if you're talking about DevOrgs, DevOrgs are a little funny with the way they do error reporting. But if it's a production environment or like a sandbox, even developer sandboxes are a lot more stable. So if this is where I'd recommend you guys test it and not in a DevOrg, because DevOrgs are a special beast with Salesforce, and they do behave differently from the normal environments. But yeah, if you want to try it out in like a dev sandbox and see what it does. Again, I'll say this again, that there are errors that that are visible to users, right? Those Salesforce does not treat as exceptions per se. But things that are not visible to users, things that are under the covers, so to speak, right? All of those are reported, and those are the ones we capture, as well as, of course, any custom errors excuse me, that you may choose to log yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's come back to this here. So there's a couple things. I mean, we don't have that much time, so I don't know that I'll have enough to go through all of the functionality, but maybe I'll just kind of glance over it, and I'm happy to do a deep dive with you guys as soon as you start playing around with this. I'll just kind of point out the general areas. So we just talked about logs and issues pretty much, right? But those are great, but what else can you do, right? So first of all, you can connect different environments together. So you might have production sandbox, production UAT sandbox, like a staging sandbox. You can link them all together, so all the logs gather in one of the orgs. You can use it in one org standalone, that's fine too. But you can connect in different environments, and you can push the logs from one to the other. And there's different ways to do that. We have what we call a broadcast mode and a pass-through mode, meaning that if two orgs are connected and it's in pass-through mode, then in one org we never save the logs. Where like an error happens, but we don't save the log. We sort of forward it to the other org. With broadcast mode, we save it in both orgs. So there's different ways you can push data around. For one of our clients, they have a dedicated log sandbox. It's just a dev sandbox, and all logs from all environments go in there. And what's cool about that is that you can then start seeing patterns and issues across the environments, right? If I'm building some sort of functionality, and I go from my dev sandbox to my UAT sandbox to my staging and then to prod, if I can look at all the logs across all of my stack, I can see the error that happened in dev sandbox, then it happened in UAT, then it happened in staging, then the same thing happened in prod. Well, that's clearly a problem because we've let this error go to production, even though we saw it earlier in the lower tier environments. So you know it's very useful for anyone, someone like a dev manager or someone that's overseeing the the change management, or pretty much responsible for the integrity of the org, right? It would be nice to know that we're letting things slip through the cracks. So that's a very common use case. For you can for consulting partners, it's a cool thing to have, because they can manage all of their clients' orgs from their own org, and they can see by org how many issues are there in each one. Are there any critical ones, that sort of thing. So you get this view across all your clients, so that you're able to react faster, maybe even alert them to the fact that, hey, you got some issues going on there. So that's another very common use case. All right, so multiple orgs. Other things that we do, I already mentioned notifications. All of this stuff is, of course, I think pretty self-explanatory, right? What's a notification? It's it's something that notifies you, and you can go and create some rules around that, right? So you could say, for example, oh, if it's a flow error, then send me a Slack message, right? You a Slack message. Or if it's an Apex error in a certain class, will send me a PagerDuty notification. So you can configure these rules that are declarative. You don't have to build any logic. Just create these rules, and you could set up all these different channels of notifications. Now, another thing we have on top of that is monitoring, which is a little bit more sophisticated in terms of what it captures. So notifications work for individual logs or issues, right? And then monitoring is different in the sense that it lets you get notified when there are certain patterns of issues occurring, right? For example, I might have a spike of logs, or I might have it could be a spike in user impact, or I have something that's recurring consistently day to day. And so you can build rules around that. And here's what that looks like. Basically, something breaches a threshold, and that's what triggers the rule to fire. And again, you can set up notifications to different channels. You can even create a Jira ticket. Speaking of Jira, that's another pretty sophisticated part of our functionality. We integrate really tightly with Jira. You can create Jira tickets for logs, for issues, for monitoring. Like you could, for monitoring rule fires, we could create a Jira ticket. And all of that logic is also governed by these rules. So you could set up, flow errors, they could go to your admin, right? Like maybe they get assigned to a specific user, or AVAX issues, they get assigned to a developer. You can set it up to go to a project, like here's a template for, this issue template, as we call them. It tells you what project it can go to, what's the type of ticket that we're creating, it's the priority, so on and so forth. And even like a merge template based contents, right? So you could throw in a link to the log record, some details and other things, and all of that will go to Jira ticket. So let me actually show you. Here's a Jira view right from the log record. This is all in line, right? So if I come open this up, it takes me to my Jira, and here's the flow. Here's the error, flow error. And from here, I can go back to my org. So very nice and seamless transition. You can keep an eye on the status of this issue, so on and so forth. There are different ways that we let me show you this thing here.
So just a quick question. So basically, it's like like a bidirectional sync, to where I just saw, like, if it's in a backlog, then that field would be obviously updated if it's in progress, or if it's in sprint.
So good question. Actually, the view that we have here on the log, this one is actually dynamic, right? So if I go to my Jira ticket and I update the status, let's see if that works actually. It's just, well, actually, let's do this. I'm going to go and add a comment here. So I add a comment. I'll come back and I think it caches it, but let's find out. It should pop up here. There we go. The test comment, right? So it's live. Obviously after the refresh, you're able to see it. So it basically is, a dynamic inline view into a Jira ticket. But there is a bit of a bidirectional component to this. Mostly it's one directional when it comes to log records. We will push data from Salesforce into Jira, but there are different things that we will set on the log record as well. So for example, let's say I had a ticket for a log that was created and I went and resolved the ticket, right? So like supposedly it got fixed. So what we'll do is if that issue happens again, we'll go and create a new ticket and link the ticket that was there, it was closed. So it does a little bit of automatic linking. Similarly, if two issues are close to each other, right? And this actually, I don't think I mentioned that, but you'll notice these colors here, the red, the blue, or I guess the green and the yellow. These are kind of our similarity measures. So red is the same thing, yellow is a similar thing, and this green is somewhat similar. So these are kind of the three levels of similarity we have. And as you can see, this view shows you all of these combined. So if two errors are close to each other or almost the same, we will actually relate those Jira tickets together corresponding to each one. So those are auto linked, and we have settings that kind of govern that. This is right there, so we can auto relate tickets by org. This is just if you have multiple orgs, do it create the same issue even if it occurred in different org. Similarity labels. So like if you notice here in Jira and come back here, this doesn't actually have any labels, but this is a different ticket. But you would have things like because it's disabled, so that's why I didn't actually create it. But if it were enabled, we would add a label to it so that you click on that label and you get all similar issues from Jira. So it's a very nice view to monitor things like that. Okay, you can pass data from Salesforce to Jira if you want to. If you have custom fields in Jira that you want to set, you can pass that from the log record. You can configure this mapping. There's a lot more that we do with issues, because issue is a much closer entity to a Jira ticket. So we'll synchronize duplicate tickets with duplicate issues. We'll synchronize related issues with related tickets, that sort of thing. So update priority. So there's a lot more that's going on with issues as far as Jira is concerned. But yeah, among other things, I do have a hard stop, unfortunately, guys, in 5 minutes. But I'll just kind of skip over some of this here. Log retention. This is a fun one too, because obviously it's a native app, right? We capture all the logs, they live in the org. Eventually you're going to get so many logs that your storage is going to get affected. You don't want that to happen. So you could set up rules when to delete these log records. Like if something is a year or older, just delete it, right? And you could set this age parameter. And again, you could define filters. So maybe you want to keep Apex errors for 3 months and flow errors you want to keep for 1 month, right? So you can configure it to do that. We can also archive these, not just delete. And then you could do a combination of things too here. So it's another one. Let's see what we have. What else? Okay, change tracking. That's an interesting one. This is something new. I don't think you guys have seen this, even those of you that have played with the tool before. This actually, we integrate with GitHub. So if you, well, by the way, I should mention that these are all the things that we integrate with. They're right here, right? So Jira, Splunk, Slack, PagerDuty, Teams, GitHub. Have integrations with all of those out of the box. You can set up a repository in GitHub where Pharos can pull metadata into. So if there are changes in your org, we'll do a commit into that repo automatically. This is for those companies that don't utilize source control, that don't have any DevOps pipeline, no CI/CD. But even if they do, it's still useful to have this change tracking enabled. And you can basically set up whatever GitHub account you want. A lot of companies will have their own, right? So it's very nice for them to kind of be able to maintain this data without exposing it to anyone. And we will actually pull all the changes in there so that you can go and see what exactly were the changes that were made over a period of time using native GitHub tools. On our roadmap, we're planning to do a lot more with this, but for right now, that's the extent of it. Yeah, let's see, integrations, we talked about that, change tracking. What else to tell you guys? Go back to here. There's sensitive data masking. So like, for example, if you have some information on the logs that you don't want to surface to users, like maybe there's some emails, right? You want to filter out emails because it's PII, or you want to, phone numbers, things like that, and you don't want them to pop up in logs. You can create a data mask that allows you to use a regex to mask that particular expression, right? So that's another thing. I think for the most part, error tracking, this is just all of the stuff that we track, right? So bulk API, batch jobs, Apex flows, email to case, all of that stuff. You can control to disable anything here that you want, so on and so forth. And let's see, I think that's probably it. I think I'll stop it here. If there's more, more questions, or I can go deep. We haven't really talked about monitoring nearly enough. There's a lot more to talk about, but I think you guys get the idea. So
yeah, we do. This is great. So I know you have a hard stop, so I just want to kind of like squeeze in maybe a question or two.
Sure.
Well, first of all, like as far as like moving forward with update or maybe reinstall in our org, that's one thing. Just put in your kind of radar. And then the second one, what we discussed about Excel, where Dwanil and I will work on implementing this tool in their org, and then we will kind of like start monitoring and tracking things for them. And
do you guys want me to help you with setting it up in Excel or in your org?
Yeah, I think it would be good. We can have maybe like most of the team.
It literally takes
that call.
Yeah, I mean, it literally will take us 10 minutes, and that's including installing the package. Depending on what integrations we want to set up, it might take a little longer, but even then it's not bad at all. So we could do like a 30-minute quick call.
Yeah, let's do that. That would be great. We do want to set up the integrations too, and for
Jira, Slack.
Well, for Jira especially, because we have just a quick, very fast screen share. Like we are currently have an integration built here for Veritas, for example.
Yes,
and also
this is actually using our old Slack integration. We have a new one that actually utilizes a Slack app, so we could set up something similar for sure. Okay,
it would be good to have something like basically in our environment for all of the clients, so it's easier for us to control the process.
Oh yeah.
But
I can show you guys how to do that.
Yeah, we can maybe then sync up, I guess tomorrow our time and figure out what's the best time to do that.
Yes, yeah, we can even do that tomorrow. We'll install it. Just get on the call like in the afternoon if you want.
Yeah, we can do that too. Just ping me whenever you're free.
Okay.
And then I'll leave it to maybe any other team members in case someone else has a question before you drop.
Yeah, feel free, guys, to Luke knows how to find me, so if you guys have a question, definitely I'm around.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Nikita. We'll let you go. I know you have stuff to do, so I really appreciate the time. This was excellent.
Totally.
We'll be in touch tomorrow.
Not a problem at all. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Cool.
Have a good
Thank you.
rest of your day. Cheers.
All right. Thanks.
You-
Cool.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's maybe just quickly sort of recap here, and then we can kind of quickly maybe go through our stand-ups so we can move on with our days and nights. So yeah, one thing is like as I just mentioned, so we have implemented their, I guess, version 1 of this product about a year ago for Veritas, and they love it. We have been so they've been using it now for a year. So we're proactively logging in our Jira, and you'll have full access to that. As a matter of fact, we've got to look at the Jira anyway, so I'll just open it up real quick. So let's see, a second. So we have here projects Veritas in the backlog. We are right now, we have a rule that we set up like way back when, where it's all being assigned to Naveen. But we haven't really been, proactively fixing anything, just because the client is a little bit specific on how they want to do things. So but what's great for us as a company is offering a tool like this to our current and future clients. Will help us also clean up the org, but then at the same time build some credibility with the client, from the perspective of that our goal is really to solve the problems for them and not sort of waste their time and keep on working on a project for no reason other than like to make money or kind of milk money from the client, right? So as Nikita was saying, like ultimately you don't want to have any of these errors, and if a client like Veritas, they have obviously a shitload of errors, but for whatever reason they're not that keen on fixing them yet. Their org is a kind of a mess anyway. But that's one thing. What I would like to do is,
sorry to
go ahead.
interrupt you. Actually, recording is in progress, so
It's
maybe
still
we can stop.
good
Yeah.
one. Yeah, thank you for telling me.